That's how powerful believing is. So if it works in that sense, then it also work in the sense of a person being broke all the time, but then mess around and start believing God and then go to having a little bit, to having a little bit more, then continue to believe God to Romans 4:19. Notice, same scripture we dealt with, son. And not being weak in faith, he did not consider his own body, we're speaking about Abraham, already dead since he was about 100 years old, and the deadness of Sarah's womb. But notice in the 19th verse where we're going to take the subject from tonight, and not being weak in faith, he did not consider his own body already dead. He didn't look at that. He didn't focus in on the fact that his body was dead. He didn't focus in or consider the fact that Sarah's womb was dead. But Abraham, being fully convinced that what he or God had promised, he or God was able to perform. So Abraham looked at what God said, and he basically said about God, he's God enough to do what he said he would do. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor the subject tonight is in the form of a question. Do you have weak faith? And I ask one more person, look him or her in their eyes and ask them, do you have weak faith? Now I want you to answer that person. I want you to answer them tonight. Now, I believe, and I hope y'all believe the same, that every believer should be strong in faith. I believe that. I believe every believer should have strong faith. I didn't get some of y'all say anything. I'm going to say it again. I believe every believer should have strong faith on the level that he or she is on. I believe your faith should be strong. In other words, I'm saying I believe all of us should believe God. I believe every one of us should believe God. And I feel like when we are not believing God, we shouldn't settle for that. You shouldn't settle for having weak faith. You shouldn't be to the point to where as long as I come to church every Sunday, as long as I'm faithful coming to church, then that's all that really matters. No, it's more than that. Because there are folk that come to church faithfully, but they have weak faith. Weak faith is faith that is inadequate, or it's the type faith that's not able to bring forth what is needed or what is desired. Now, when it comes to me, I don't want to operate in the type faith that's not going to produce what I say I'm expecting. I don't want to do that because if I do that, then I'm going to end up without being blessed or what I'm hoping for is not going to happen. And it won't be God's fault. It's going to be my faith. It's going to be the fact that I'm operating in weak faith. Now, let me deal with this real quick, because if I don't deal with it, and I don't want to stay here for long, if I don't deal with it, some of y'all mind going to run to that scripture, and you won't have an understanding of that scripture when folk talk about if you have faith as the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, do this and do that, and it'll be removed. And so you have folk that'll go around saying stuff like, all your faith got to do is just be real little. You can just have, that ain't what the Bible was talking about. See, we missed the point that he then talked about that mustard seed would start small, but it would eventually grow into what? A large tree. So really what he was talking about, if you have faith that's progressive, meaning our faith needs to grow. You see what I'm saying? Not just you run around here talking about you can just have faith that size and you're going to do great things. How? That ain't biblically sound. Now let's just look at Sarah tonight. If Sarah's faith was weak, which at one point we could go back and say that she had weak faith, because when God first spoke to her through the angels about her being pregnant and bringing forth a child, many of us that know the Bible know Sarah laughed. She laughed and she basically said, shall I get old and now I'm going to have a child? He going to wait until I get old and now I'm going to have a child? But she didn't believe God. But understand, if Sarah's faith was weak, she would have remained barren. Listen, when she didn't have to be barren. You hear me? She would have been barren, unable to produce a child because she didn't believe God. We also can take it a step further and say Sarah could have died a barren woman, never having brought forth a child because she refused to believe God. Now, we don't have to limit barrenness to just pregnancy, because some people are barren in other aspects of life, and the reason nothing is coming forth is because their faith is weak, or they're not believing God in the way that they should believe God. So see, that means God can speak something wonderful over me, but if I don't believe God, if I don't operate in strong faith, then I won't be able to do what God said I could do. Are y'all with me tonight? I really want to just take my time and break this down, because again, it's too many people in the church settle for having weak faith when your faith does not have to be weak. You can have a tight faith to where you can believe God for anything. You can believe God to do what seems impossible to people. But when your faith is strong, you can believe God, even though God may speak a thing and then everything that can go wrong seemingly starts going wrong. You won't be crying. You won't be complaining. You won't be poor-mouthing. You won't be doubting. Why? You operating in strong faith, and your faith says to you that God will do whatever he's promised to do. Whatever he's promised to do. And so notice scripturally how Romans 4 breaks down weak faith. And not being weak in faith, he did not consider his own body already dead, since he was about 100 years old, and the deadness of Sarah's womb. Notice, weak faith focuses on the wrong thing. When your faith is weak, you set in your mind to think on things that you don't need to be thinking about that. Because like it or not, there are things that God has promised to us that it doesn't matter what we have or don't have. He didn't base it on what you had. Saving when it comes to faith. Do y'all understand? Because sometimes God will make you a promise, and naturally speaking, you wondering like, Lord, I'm going to need this. I'm going to need that. I'm going to need. No, what you going to need is a mind to believe God. Do you hear me? Because when you have a mind to believe God, God will do things for you that will blow your mind. Listen, believing is powerful. Believing is powerful, right? Let's look at it like this. Some of us tonight, because of our faith in God, I'm going to show you how believing can be to the extreme. Some of us, because of how we believe God or how we trusted God, we are no longer tonight what we used to be. Yeah, that's something to give him a praise for. Take, for example, Brother Bo used to be an alcoholic. Used to drink liquor all the time. But guess what? Tonight, Brother Bo no longer drinks alcohol. He no longer gets drunk all the time. How did he go from being a drunk to being sober? Belief. Belief. Some of us that used to do drugs and felt like we could not manage without them. But tonight you clean. You don't do drugs no more. How did you go from having to have something, not able to function without it, to being to the point to where you don't need it? It doesn't have to be in your life. That's how strong belief is. Belief changed some of us tonight into being things and people that folk thought we'd never be. Some folk thought we'd never be what we are tonight. That's how powerful believing is. That's how powerful believing is. So if it works in that sense, then it also work in the sense of a person being broke all the time, but then mess around and start believing God, and then go to having a little bit. To having a little bit more, then continue to believe God to having more than enough, then continue to believe God. Now they're going to having more than enough, and now they're known for helping other people. Just as powerful. That's how believing is powerful. You see the change? So in some of our lives, change is not happening because of our faith. We are operating in weak faith. And when a child of God gets to acting in operating in weak faith, his or her attitude or behavior going to change. Do you hear me? His or her attitude or behavior is going to change. See, a person that gets operating in weak faith will go from being known as a praiser to just coming to church, folding his or her hand, and not even getting involved in service. Right? A person operating in weak faith will go from being a giver to holding back on God, robbing God. It's real. A person that gets to operating in faith will go from being a person always bragging on God to now everything comes out of his or her mouth is negative. Because when you operate in weak faith, it's going to change your behavior. It's going to change your attitude for the worse. Y'all feeling me? Because just like belief is powerful, unbelief is powerful also. Because some of us, we don't really think, well, Pastor, I know I'm not believing, but ain't no but there. If you ain't believing, something wrong with that picture. And you gotta get to where you believe God. Right? You got to get to the point where you take God at his word, listen, despite what you see with your eyes. You still take him at his word.